I'm Jessica Peresta, host of the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Teaching While Queer is a podcast for 2S LGBTQ+ educational professionals to share their experiences in academia. Hi, I'm your host, Brian Stanton, a theater pedagogue and educator in New York City, and my goal is to share stories from around the world from 2S LGBTQ+ educators. I hope you enjoy Teaching While Queer. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Teaching While Queer. I am your host, Brian Stanton. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm excited to have a double interview today. I have Victoria LeBron and Gab Sussman with me. Hi, how are you two doing?
Hello.
Great.
So
Hi.
excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. Do you mind taking a second and introducing yourself to our listeners?
Of course.
Sure. I'm Victoria LeBron. I use she, her pronouns.
And I'm Gab Sussman. I use they, she pronouns.
Awesome. And how do you identify within the community as all of our wonderful acronym?
Yeah. I identify as non-binary. I also identify as queer. And we'll get into later, like why queer. But yeah, that's me.
I identify as bisexual, but I'm also like becoming more comfortable with like just branching out into queer. I think that is like starting to feel a little better for me. So yeah.
I'm really enjoying the like reclamation of queer because I also identify as queer, and I'm like, it just feels better. It just feels better to say for me personally. And I've taken a lot of queer studies classes, and so I think that's kind of helped from like the academic in me. It's like, oh, I have like an academic understanding of this word now, and so it makes more sense in my brain.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your roles in education. What do you do as far as education goes?
Yeah. So we are both former classroom teachers, both like formally trained, went to school, were to like become classroom teachers. And ipso facto, are no longer in the classroom. We decided to start our own business. It's an educational collective here in Baltimore City, and which is called Be More Transform. That is short for Baltimore Transformative Learning Collective. But we are still very much engaged and involved and passionate about teaching, learning, educating and educators and youth. So we, like this morning, had a graphic novel club with 11 like 7 through 9-year-olds at a local bookstore, which was super fun. Like it was great. Yeah, we work with schools, we work with youth, we work with families, we consult, we do a lot of things that we honestly didn't really have the capacity, both like energy wise and resource wise, to do while we were teaching full time, right? Because it was like 65 hours a week, serving
plus
like the classroom.
The stress of like,
oh yeah,
that like was extra exhausting too.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Teachers,
administrators being like, no, you can't. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yo, we're recording on a Saturday, and they got 7 to 9-year-olds to get up in the morning on a Saturday and go read graphic novels. So right there, like that's just a huge achievement. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. But also shout out to those kids. Like, I mean, graphic novels are super fun. We love them ourselves, like it was just like a big nerding experience. And it brings us a lot of joy to be able to do things like that.
I love that.
In our city.
All right. Do you mind taking a trip back in time with me and talking a little bit about what your experience was like as a queer student?
I love this question so much. I'm someone who like knew I was queer as a younger person, but like I didn't feel like I was in a place where I could really be out. And like my parents kind of knew, but they didn't take it seriously. It was very much like a phase thing. And so when I went to school, which was a religious school, I felt scared because I just didn't know how it would be received. And yeah, it's funny because I went to an all-girl Catholic school, and there were so many people in my class who were like bi or like, but then when they left, they had like a boyfriend, and so it was like hard to know like who was really, and yeah, I just felt really scared. So I wasn't out in school. And I look back and I think about how I spent so much time like in my head, just like confused, not understanding, not really having any role models, not knowing which teachers were safe. And I had some friends who knew, but like also were like, I don't know what to do, and yeah, it was just kind of a scary time, but no like physical threats, just sort of like a lot of it was in my head. And yeah. So it's interesting. And it makes me feel so good now that I'm like, I'm just out, and like, it's great. And I in some ways wish that like, if I could go back, I would just maybe do it differently. I don't know. Yeah.
It is wild what the like fear of the unknown will do, because you grew up in a religious school, no physical threats, right? You knew some people who said that they were also bisexual, or which means they're a part of the queer community. But at the same time, your brain is like creating this real sense of fear. And I think the brain is so wild. Like in another life, I'm sure I'm going to study the brain, or I've studied the brain, because I think it is so wild. Just the fact that like you can think something and it can become so real and visceral for you.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. And honestly, that I resonate with that so hard. Like, again, I was a really like terrified kid. I grew up in a really small town in the Hudson Valley of New York. So like the suburbs of New York City. It was like mountainous. And so like people kind of like, like there were, I don't know. It just like, it didn't feel welcoming for me. I was also one of the few like kids of color in my school. And then like even fewer mixed race kids. So I just like that, coupled with the fact, so I just like, I never felt like I fit in, and I desperately wanted to. And so it looked a lot like me mirroring what other people were doing. I also then on top of that grew up in a household that didn't encourage like risk taking or even just like exploration. Like my parents had like a very clear idea of like what our roles were as daughters. Speaking of like my older sister and we just like did what we expected. And we were expected to do what was expected of us. So like all of those things just led me to just being like a follower in a sense, right? And so it wasn't until my early adulthood that I had an opportunity to just really learn more about who is Gab, like who am I as a person? Like, what do I care about? What do I like that is not in response to what the people around me like, or like who they are, right? So I think like, so as a queer child, I was just like a shell, right? I just like receded in. I didn't want to like, I didn't have any mirrors or any examples of what it looked like to be to try on new things, or even like within what it means to be non-binary, or as someone who was assigned female at birth, there was a very clear expression, right, that you were expected to match in order to again be accepted. And this was like in the late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah, so that was a time. And unlike Victoria, I would never go back. If time travel was like offered, if somebody would have to pay me a lot of money to go back in time, as myself or as just like, nope, history can stay there.
I hear that. I think it's like I think of it as like a reparenting thing, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Little Victoria. Also, I forgot to mention I'm from Queens, New York. So I like went to a Catholic high school in Queens. We're both New Yorkers.
Yes.
Anyway, but yeah, like a way to be like, you are fine. You're like, you can claim this thing, you know, because at the end of the day, like my parents were supportive, you know, but like at the time I didn't know it.
It's so interesting because I grew up in Southern California. I currently live now in the Bronx, so in New York City. And you had an experience that's similar to me and my experience. And we're both in these places that are like archetypal progressive, right? But still in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was this real strict binary and expectation. Like when I quit baseball to do music was like a huge deal because, you know, that was a more of a sissy thing to do. And then, wow, what happened when I became a musical theater actor in high school. So I think it's so interesting because a lot of people, when I talk to them who are from the Midwest and whatnot, and I share that, you know, we had the same experiences, even though we were in vastly different places. And even though there's this perception of progress. And so I think it's pretty interesting just having that shared experience from across the coast.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
And especially because when people think of like, oh, you know, New York and California, the most liberal places in the country, that's like the go-to, right? Those are the two spots. And especially because I grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles, like LA and New York City, those are the places to be if you're going to be different. But a lot of the stories that I've heard over the last 2 years doing these interviews really mirror what I experienced in LA and what you're saying you experienced here in Queens and in the Hudson Valley. So it's really interesting to me, just kind of the perceptions that we have about space and time and what it means to be in a specific, like the idiom that, you know, the grass is always greener, and it's quite in fact the same grass.
And oh my God.
So we touched a little bit on this earlier, but can you talk a little bit more about your experience as classroom educators?
So we were teachers for a long time. Like I taught for 10 years.
Same.
And essentially, like you have your master's in inclusive education. I got my master's in educational leadership, and both did like, you know, took on DEI roles and teacher leader roles. And ultimately, like it was never the students. The students were never the problem.
Never. They're always delightful.
It's always the politics and the adults who like center themselves, who are ultimately like incompetent in their roles, right? And don't fully see education or don't share this, like didn't share the same values that we have, right? So we as classroom teachers, like we had the opportunity to work on the same team, and it was really, really fun. And it was, I mean, that's how we met.
Yeah.
We met because we were on the same teaching team. And it was just, it got to a point where it was untenable, where people were so resistant, where they were like targeting us.
It was like,
it was hostile.
Legit angry.
It was really hostile. And like to the point where like Victoria and I and many other people had been given roles to steward DEI initiatives at our school were literally when I was hired at that school, like it was part of the understanding that I had all this training and I would be stepping into like partner with the DEI office to do this. And yet I was then villainized essentially for like speaking out and doing the things
you
that
did
literally
what they hired you to do.
Oh yeah.
Like I remember the email that went out when you were hired. And I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah. Like
I want to be friends with this person. And then you started it and I was like, yes, like everything you said. And then other people were like, wait, I feel weird. And it's like, okay, so I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's not about you.
Yeah. Right.
Like it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that like ultimately it became not about us as classroom teachers, but it was just like our values with this education system, just like we cannot continue to be complicit in something that is so harmful and so violent towards people who are like us. Right. So that just led to a point. And that led to a point where we were just like, well, let's do something together.
Yeah.
And that's where Be More Transformed came from. But we have so much respect for educators, administrators, like, again, like do a lot of work to support youth and educators and to really hold space for all stakeholders. Because I mean, education is a human right. And the way in which most of our country is treated within the system is absolutely horrible. And so like as abolitionist educators, we want to both help triage and respond and support like the folks who are in it now. And then also partner with other organizations and help build towards a world where education is different, is just completely like is decolonized, has been reconstructed to look completely different from what it is now. And we don't know what it looks like, but like it's not this.
Well, and I think it is already changing. Like I see all these articles about like kids who are feeling safer at home during COVID or not. And it's like, this is something we will need to address.
Yeah.
Because we can't just pretend that there were kids, specifically, like there were lots of Black and brown kids who felt safer, right? Lots of queer kids who felt safer out of the classroom. That's saying a lot. And like, you can't just forget about those people. I understand that there are people in this country who want to just forget that those people exist, but we're not going anywhere. And I think it scares some people, like when we talk about like the education system is going to change because it will have to. It's going to have to evolve in order to stay relevant, you know? And I think some people are like, yeah, but it's just going to like, it's just going to be replaced by like voucher, whatever. But I am excited for the change because I'm hoping it's like you said, that it's like decolonized. It's like more abolitionist. It's more inclusive, you know? And like, unfortunately, we do hear about people who don't like to hear about inclusion. And it's like, it's just so, you know, it reminds me of how I felt when I left the classroom, which was, I was just disgusted by the amount of adults who centered themselves, who were, it was really about their discomfort level.
Yeah.
You know, who would come into my classroom and tell me like, oh, you know, your class is doing this and I just don't think it's a good idea because people are going to think that you're trying to indoctrinate them. But it's like, buddy, these kids brought it up to me.
Yeah.
And then I have empowered them to be leaders. Right. So like, yeah. But it's like, they can't, these are people who don't see children as like fully realized human beings.
Yeah. Our country hates kids.
Our
country hates teachers. You know, like it's just so clear, and we're not about that life. And again, like we understanding like had a lot of like privilege in that moment to like literally fully step out of the system and create something from scratch. It's been hella hard, and at the same time, that's why like as a collective, we are excited about like our work towards building towards being a co-op, so that other educators can have a pathway to still stay connected to kids and families and education, but like outside of the oppressive system that exists today. And so,
and potentially like play a role in shaping something new.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, like I would really like for us to down the road, you know, like think about that. Think about like getting people on board who know what it is to like reshape policy or so. I don't know. It's a long way. Long way.
Well, we do. Yeah. We are. Yeah. We're in like community with people who work on education policy, but like, it is also just the two of us.
It's just the two of us. Right? That's not really a possibility unless we're never sleeping.
When we say collective, like I wish we had like an army, or not an army, like a horde.
Yeah, we will.
A murder of people behind us.
A murder of people. I love it.
Yes.
But it's just us for now.
For now.
Oh, there's so many things that popped up when you guys were talking. And the first one that really comes to mind for me personally is I truly believe that from the outside perspective, there are no humans in schools because we are treated so like educators aren't human and children aren't human and administrators aren't human. Like some of the things that I've read in emails, some of the things that have been said to me and other people I know who it's just because we are working, doing our job in a classroom. They're quite disgusting. I had an administrator tell me that she had never been called cunt before ever in her life, and she came to this school and received several emails a week with that. A week. And I'm just like, wow. Like, and when I was growing up, that was one of the most offensive things that you can say to a woman. And I know that some of the queer community is like, you know, we're bringing it back. We're reclaiming it, whatever. But it's still like in context, a very derogatory thing to say.
Oh yeah.
And it's wild to me because I really think that like if we were considered human beings, that this behavior would calm down.
It's also interesting, Brian, because I mean, we like when we work with school, like some of the schools that we've worked with, and the way in which, and even not like even when we were teachers, like hearing the way some teachers talk about their students. But then also, like, I know when in my, like, master's degree program, working with other aspiring and, like, people who were administrators already, but, like, getting their master's degree, like, the way that, like, teachers were spoken about in the same way. Like, the, like this us versus them, like, you know, they're, like, down there. And then also hearing the way people at the district level talk about principals and teachers. It's patriarchal, but it's like it is this like cycle of like, oh my God, what is it when it's like people who are oppressed, right? When you punching down, that's what it is.
Oh,
you're like literally punching, right? Which is like terrible because right there's someone who's like punching you, so you're like punching the people below you who have less power. But ultimately it's like no one feels respected.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Across the board.
Yeah, the people like at the center are like ultimately getting the worst of it, which is like the kids. The students are the ones who, again, like are affected by all the policy, are affected by the revolving door of and the like lack of retention, right? They don't have any power in what happens or in any situation. And then it's like, oh, but learning loss and like all these other things. And it's just like, come on, people, like, wow.
Yep. Learning loss. That can go right up there with self-care as far as educational buzzwords that don't need to be said anymore.
Yeah.
I remember that being the thing that so many educators and like parents and caregivers were worried about when COVID first started, like that fall.
Oh, the learning loss?
Oh, yes. And I was like, can we talk about I remember saying to parents, so I was the virtual teacher, and I said to families, like, I am more concerned if your child is enjoying themselves. And they were like, yes, that's great, but learning loss. And I couldn't get over, like, as a parent myself, like, I really am like, is my child feeling good and safe when they go to school?
Yeah.
Can they get their needs met? And like, they're learning, that's great. But like that whole idea, I was like, where are they going? Like they're in 5th grade. Can we relax? Like,
they're also like not going to learn if they feel
they're
stressed.
not that part.
So
that part.
Literally like neuroscience people, let's be real.
And
science goes out the window, right?
Right.
But that's where like the inclusion piece that like we are so passionate about comes in, because when you are inclusive, you are paying attention to the whole person. You're not just thinking about like, did you do your homework? Right. It's like, okay, well, what's going on? How do you feel? Like you're fully involved, all of you. You can be raggedy, like we were saying, and it's not that much extra work to like open a space to like allow people to be themselves.
Well, for some people, it's not that,
okay,
right? Because that again, like that means you have to have like the self-awareness. You need to have like the emotional capacity, not even the emotional capacity, but like literally the emotional intelligence to like, like something's off, right? And so we work with an organization out of DC called Empower Ed that is like really big on teacher wellness, which I really really applaud them for getting to the root, like not just like, oh, take some breaths, or like use that EAP. It's like really like, what are the issues? Like working with teachers, working with administrators, because like it is solvable. It absolute like teacher retention and especially like with Black teachers, with queer teachers, with disabled teachers, like there are actual strategies to retain teachers. And yet like every week there's like a new article like, oh my God, teachers are leaving the field. It's like, I mean, again, nobody's refusing to actually invest the resources, AKA the money, to do what needs to be done to keep your teachers. And it's just like that refusal. So like, it's the like tip of the iceberg, like, oh, there's like a massage person, like, we're like, oh my God. No.
In the cafeteria.
No, but like, which is a thing we've seen.
Are you serious? Oh my God.
It's not in the cafeteria. No, it's in the teacher's lounge.
Oh, okay.
But it's like,
there was in the cafeteria. I definitely think it was.
Yikes.
That does not sound relaxing at all, though. Like these children like screaming and you're in a massage chair. right?
Oh, no,
or the airport.
Like the person who's giving you a massage in the chair, not the massage chair in a teacher's lounge. Not terrible, but
not absolutely
like,
not terrible.
This thing and like get a massage from this person in the middle of the cafeteria. So thank you so much for this. Like I love feeling like this while like 17-year-olds are walking past me.
Yeah. Or a $20 bag of candy. Yeah.
Or my favorite was like, it's the holidays. Congratulations. We gave you this cup with some Hershey's Kisses in it.
Oh my God.
Have a great day. And I'm like, okay, why is everything related to food? That's what I want to, like, as a person who has body dysmorphia because of my weight, why does everything for a teacher come down to, we bought you pizza and we gave you candies and cookies? Like, that's literally the archetypal, I'm going to give you this apple. And while an apple might be healthy, like, it's still food. Like, why does everything center on food for teachers?
You know what's interesting? That's what a lot of teachers do for kids too. It's like, if we do this, we'll get a pizza party. So it's almost like they're like, oh, well, it works for the kids, so do it for the teachers.
It's funny. My 9-year-old came home all excited because they had a donut party because they, had the highest rate of improvement on, whatever test they were taking. And I was like, cool. Donut party. Wow.
Yes.
So we've talked like about this, punching down kind of feeling when it comes to the general educational community, and lots of people are leaving the field, but lots of people are also joining the field. Not at the same rates, obviously, otherwise there wouldn't be a quote unquote shortage. There's not a shortage. You just don't want to pay people and treat them well.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, people are just refusing.
They don't want to be punching bags. It's wild. It's wild when that happens. But if you were talking to someone who is just hopping into the classroom and they're a queer educator, and given, the turbulent times that we live in and the already toxic environment that is being an educator, what advice would you give them about being their authentic self in the classroom?
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, this question reminds me of the time we spoke to like literally a group of student teachers.
Yes.
And we were like, basically explaining, well, our goal was to like help contextualize and to bring to, I guess, there's so much there's so much societal misinformation and disinformation about what it means to be a teacher. And so we were like hoping to be just like another touch point to like inject some realism into some folks, right, who are like working towards becoming teachers. And one of the people was like, it sounds pretty terrible. And
he said, it sounds like you're trying to scare us from going into the field. Because we were also giving them tips about like, when this happened, like scenarios, like if this thing happens, make sure you know who the administrator is that does XYZ, so that like you can actually try to get your needs met, right? But we were trying to be as honest as we could, and he did not like it.
I don't know if I want to assume that he didn't like it. I think it was just like, I think it was just like, this is very or much darker, or I don't know, like it just hearing him say that, I was like, the intention is not to scare you. Again, it's to like prepare you. Did you want to dive in or?
I think this is a great question. I think it's something that even teachers who are just like switching schools should think about too, like how, it's essentially like, how do you gauge the environment, right? How do you gauge the culture? Because like in an interview, you might get one vibe, but then it might be totally different. And so like, I would say like, use your judgment, take a little time to get to know the ecosystem of the school so that you can determine how safe you feel. One thing that I did to when I started at the school where we taught together was I got a ton of posters and postcards mostly postcards to show like that showed like my value of inclusion and how like I wanted people to like get the feeling when they came into the room that like, and I had like safe space posters and things like that. And I knew who was safe based on who would walk, because I also had some on the door, who would walk past and say like, oh my gosh, I love your posters. Thank you for having these up, whatever, whether it was a parent, a child, administrator, teacher, right? But I would also have, and this was mostly from other teachers who would come in and say, I don't know why you want to advertise all of this. I would take that down. I would take this down. And I was like, so that person's not safe, and those were the same teachers that would come in and like talk badly about kids. And so it was good. That way I could learn like, all right, I don't talk to that person. And so it was like an easy way to kind of like try and like be authentic within my space. And then know once I was out of my classroom, like who I could be safe around.
Yeah, it's like an implicit way.
Yeah.
I think something that I began to do as I became more like comfortable with my own values as a teacher. Like I remember when I was a student teacher and we had to write like an educational philosophy, right? And that was very much just like a regurgitation of like all the education philosophers that I had learned about, right? Vygotsky and Piaget and like blah, 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 right? But like as I began to really, and this was also coupled with me learning more about myself, like I was like, those two journeys, like Gab discovering Gab and Gab being like Miss Sussman were just kind of like together. I began like, when it came time to interview and to talk to people, I wanted people to know who I was because I ultimately wanted to be who I was. Like, I want to be who I am in all facets of my life, right? I don't want to compartmentalize. I don't want to be this kind of person at home, this kind of person at work, and at school, right? It's like, I don't want to be this kind of person with my students and this kind of person with my colleagues and this kind of person with my boss, right? Like, I want people to know who I am, like, and I am one person. Like, I believe my beliefs, like how I move through the world is how I want to move through every space that I'm in. And so I was really intentional about like taking that risk, honestly, and just being really clear about like, I actually use they pronouns. And I remember I adopted like they pronouns mid-year, like, and a lot, like, just kind of was, I came out to my students were the first group of people I came out to as non-binary. And I would say, like, as a first year teacher or someone who's aspiring to be a teacher, to like really, it's absolutely attainable to find a school that accepts you for who you are. And that like stupid like idiom of like, you gotta kiss a lot of frogs to get your prince or princess. I don't, right? Is that the thing? Where you gotta try on a lot of shoes? I don't know.
No.
There can be trial and error, right? Yeah. And obviously I'm saying trial and error with like schmoozing over the part that's like maybe trauma, maybe pain, like, you know, this like breaking up with the school, leaving mid-year, like those things are real. They happen to a lot of us.
Right.
And often, like, if you are in a space that truly accepts who you are, that is going to allow you to be successful, happier. Mm-hmm. It's going to benefit everyone, right? Like, the students deserve to have like dope, queer, BIPOC, disabled, like all like marginalized teachers who represent their marginalized identities. And oftentimes we are we are like in the revolving door, and that sends a message to students. And so ultimately, like, if you are not in a safe environment, like, don't feel like you have to stay for the students. Like, you need to prioritize your, like, how you feel in that environment. And like, we know so many people who like are different at work. Like, they aren't out to their students. And even like high school teachers, like middle school teachers. And we also know early childhood, elementary teachers that are out to their students. Like, it's, you can absolutely be out to any age kid, right? But you're just going to be like happier and more successful if you really try to lean in to showing up authentically. It might take time, and that's fine. It's just like, if I can empower people to have that as a goal, like to work towards, would love to see more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that collectively you guys have made it a point about, it starts with interview, it starts with research, but then it also starts the first day you're on campus. It's almost like each step that you're taking is a new evaluation of what the space is like and the environment you're going through. And I agree with you. I understand that when times are hard, it might feel like you have to stay someplace because you can't afford to go elsewhere. But I also want to say that it will be much better for you to look while you are trudging along, because you can always look for something better, even if you're dealing with what you currently have.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And that is also like, again, I was in that situation where I was like, oh, I really like need to go somewhere else. But then you work 65 hours a week. Like, it's like you're tired, like you have papers to grade, you like have all the things. You're worried if your school is going to catch wind, that you're looking like all the things. And it's like, like it's worth the investment. It really is. And also, like, what we love about our work is that we get to have, we host a monthly series for anyone who works with kids. And we have free food, free drinks. And it's a great way to break out of that silo. So often, like, when you're working in a school, like, your friends are teachers because they have the same schedule, right? Like, you might go out for drinks after work. Like, you end up getting really close to your colleagues, but like, you may not know your counterpart, right? If you teach third grade, like, the third grade teacher literally in the school a block from you, right? Or like, even outside of your grade band or your grade level. So encouraging folks to branch out and try to really break out of that silo and meet other people will also help with just getting leads on other things, right? Like, being a teacher we're not like career changer, like, we're no longer in class, we're still educators. But what we have noticed is that, if a lot of people love to hire teachers because teachers are doing a lot. We have to be hella organized. We have to be good communicators where we can like multitask, right? And so oftentimes, like, there are other education adjacent or teacher adjacent roles at other organizations that you may not have like even realized, like, this is interesting. Maybe I'll try this for a little bit, like, and so, like, also just trying to like wade through that and like hold space for yourself. But also it can be really easy, as you said, Brian, to like feel stuck and then just like, okay, I'll just sign my contract or I'll just see where they put me. And, oh, I hate that, you know, like if you get moved, but then you never do anything about it, it's like really try to prioritize yourself and give yourself like that opportunity to find something that will make you a little bit happier.
Right.
Absolutely.
Breathing room. I think the other thing that can cause the stuck feeling is like the guilt of thinking about like, oh, but if I leave, and I think there is something that like is like maybe programmed into teachers to believe that like, oh, if we leave, like, oh my gosh,
who will
what are
they
gonna
have?
do,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that like leaving in some ways, like if you think about it, like the burnt out teachers who've been there for so long and they're just mean, you know, like they stayed too long. And now maybe they started their career loving kids or tolerating that, you know, and now they're like just angry, you know, that the kids have questions that are like normal questions, you know, and I think about that it's like, if you're worried that you leaving mid-year could be traumatic, like it might be for some kids, they might really miss you, but like also you staying and like burning yourself to a crisp is not good for you, but it's also really not good for the kids. Cause like they'll know you're going to snap more often. You're going to, you know, unless you're, I don't know.
We've seen it.
Like,
yeah, we've seen it.
And it's just like, it's not, I think that's probably worse. I don't know. I mean, everyone has their own gauge, but I think the myth of like, you're the only one who can help them is like, it's not fair to anybody, you know?
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. And kids will like, you can still keep in touch with kids. Like,
that part.
I'm still in touch with like students I've taught many, many years ago.
Yeah.
And it's so sweet. Like when you leave, like, you can always share your email. Like it's not like you'll never see them again. Maybe some you won't, but like ultimately, like the kids who want to keep in touch with you can have that agency. And it's just like, and also one last thing to add, kids are great everywhere. Because the school that we worked at, like they did a really interesting job convincing us that like our students are amazing. They're unlike anywhere else. And I do remember, like I worked at this school right after I had moved. And I remember being like, oh my God, these kids are like a little bit more vibrant. I don't know. There's like something different about them. And I mean, they were great. I love those students.
Right.
And like we work with many schools across the city and we love every group of students. Like
adorable and curious and wonderful.
Yeah.
And kind.
And so like if you leave, like I think there's just like all of these layers that are put on teachers to keep them stuck, like to keep us stuck, right? And pushing back against that, like it's very much like it needs to be an intentional disruption out of the pattern of you like literally just like falling asleep every night on the couch, right? And you're like, oh, I could have like updated my resume, but like no, like pry those eyeballs open, like give it one last look. Just like it takes that intentional like effort. But
absolutely. There's something that you were saying and it got me thinking about how like educational structure is very much built on like patriotism and nationalism. And it's that idea of like, why do we have mascots? To get everybody behind the school, and this is our school, and so that's why we have the most amazing kids, and our kids here are special. And not only do they convince the teachers of that, but they try to convince the children of that, and that we're better than the people down the street. And it's just, I feel like I read an article on this about a year ago, but don't quote me on that. Maybe it was a meme. Who knows? But the idea is still lingering in my brain about how how education is set up in a way to try to convince people that like you are better than other people.
Yeah, it's ultra competitive in that way.
Yeah,
and also to the way in which it also like disempowers families. Like we've also, same school that we've taught at, like schools, some schools like don't want to teach all learners. And so for whatever reason, they'll right, like identify like this is our niche, right? Or these are the students we can serve well. Anybody outside of that, they either have to put up with it, get their needs met elsewhere through tutoring, through support groups, through whatever, or right, like maybe leave. But how disempowering that is for queer youth. And it's especially like when it comes to bullying, when it comes to just, like I'm thinking of situations where like kids are just bullied to the point where they have to leave that school, or their learning needs are just not being met at all and have to leave that school. And it's like, and to your point, Brian, about like that, like, well, like you just didn't fit in. And it's like, no, the point is that like, especially in public education, what are we talking about fitting in? Like this, I mean, again, history of public education, holding space for that. But also like public education is for the public. Like we can't, and that's why there are laws in place saying that you can't discriminate or you can't not tend to the needs of these kids, right? But yeah, schools will like the mental gymnastics or the districts, right? That will happen in order to do that. And we're in Maryland and in Baltimore City, there's like a system that's called school choice for high school. And that's like a whole
and middle school.
Thank you. That's a whole mess, charter school system. Like that's a whole other podcast. But like ultimately it just ends up being the mess that exists today.
Yeah. I'm thinking about doing a summer school session of this podcast where we pick topics and just have people talk about them. So one of them is going to be like charter schools, and the other one is going to be about, teacher self-care, like from a teacher perspective. What do you need?
Love that.
So I'll let you know if we get to charter schools.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that is definitely a thing.
Absolutely.
And not to mention like voucher programs and stuff like that. There's a lot. Academic policy. We'll just start there. Final question for you all before we wrap up the interview is thinking about all of the things that we've talked about. I mean, we still have a love of education and a love for educating students. However, the educational system and the school communities are very toxic. So what are some things that you think that the schools communities can do to be more inclusive of LGBTQIA+ folks?
Something that we've seen that has been really impactful that we've been a part of is engaging all stakeholders. It is so important. Like, again, this is about the students. But this does not mean that only the students get the lessons on queerness, right? Like teachers need to be trained, administrators and staff need to be trained, families need to be trained. And it needs to come from this lens of, well, like if we are a community that cares about each other, we know that this, like, research shows that this population experiences school in this very oppressive, violent way. And like, we need to do better as a community, right? and like take it back from the patriotism, like rah, rah, go Tigers. It's like, we are a community, we care about each other, and we do that by, right? Like showing up, by doing the learning, by asking the hard questions, by like holding each other accountable. So we need to make sure that there is work done at every stakeholder level. And if you're going to make students sit through assemblies, then you need to make the teachers sit through the faculty meetings. Then you need to make the parents sit through the parent meetings. We see it where, I mean, we've worked with schools that when they're like, what do we do? How do we, and we're like, needs to be a comprehensive, like, support, right? We support all stakeholders. And they're like, but can we prioritize the students? And like, yeah, I mean, sure. And like everybody, all the other adults aren't held accountable, don't have the same type of experience or learning. And therefore, like, how far is the needle moving? Right. And it's not, the thing is, it's not, right? It's like the whole house is on fire, but let's spray water into that one window.
The one window.
Right there, right? And it's like, no, that's not actually going to put out the fire. So really making sure that it takes like, obviously intentional work, takes a lot of effort. But oftentimes, like, schools want to bring the community together. They want people to be engaged. And it can feel challenging to, again, like, make families show up for something or, like, have conversations, especially about, like, serving queer students, depending on the school, the state that you're in. Like, even saying that might literally get someone fired. And I mean, in Maryland, and so we just need to, again, think about, like, we really care about our community. And again, research shows that these students are like dying by suicide at a higher rate, are actually not performing as well academically as the mainstream, as like privileged students, right? That we need to really sit with that and like do something about it.
Yeah. The other piece I think about is like, many schools have mission statements, and a lot of times these mission statements, like, sometimes it's just a word salad, right?
Ooh.
And other times it's like, it actually makes sense and has substance to it, right? And so when a school has a mission statement, if there's anything in there why is that thumb
I don't know.
over my face?
I don't know.
Sorry. I was just like, did I do something?
For those of you who are at home not being able to experience this because you're not watching it, there is a random thumbs up that is appearing on the screen.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And it is super fun, but like, nobody knows where it came from.
No. But yeah, but so like I think about how, like, using someone's words against them, right? Like, so these schools that are like, we value all kinds of learners, right? But then they really only want neurotypical learners, right? Or like, we value all kinds of people, but yet every single year they literally, like, with pitchforks, like, chase out strong Black female educators, right? Like, or just like strong Black and brown educators, period, right? Like, if they have that, you just remind, like, oh, but it says this, like, so is that, oh, I thought you valued all kinds of learners. So then why can't this child get an accommodation, or like, why isn't this teacher allowed to share this book with their class or whatever it might be? And like, it really boils down to one of our favorite phrases, which is walking the talk, right? These places, they love to, right? Whether it's in writing
on the website,
or,
have pictures on the website,
drone video of like,
of
kids
the campus
walking. But like, I think about how there's so many times where like something will get shut down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or an event will get like very minimized because it upset an adult. Right. And
one adult usually.
Who made noise. Right. And I think about like, why don't, like, many of us do, like, we did this when we were at these schools, like using their words against them. But like, if you're going to say you do this, you have to do this, even if you have this angry lady or man or who or person right over here who's like, I don't like it, it makes me feel uncomfortable. Like, do it. You have to do it because you said you're doing it. And like, it's this fear of like, I guess it's the bottom line, right? They're worried they're going to lose money. They're worried they're going to lose funding, from like
foundations,
whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, why are we teaching kids all these like important ethical lessons if then as adults, we're just supposed to like skirt around them? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And so it's like, I just think like reminding these places again and again, like, this is in your mission statement.
Yeah.
This is what you said. If you want to write it more accurately than just say we're a bunch of chicken shits who actually can't deal with anything. And we're scared. We're scared.
Put that on a website.
We're like,
that is the episode quote.
I love it. Slap on a t-shirt. I'll wear it.
But it's like, that's what it feels like to me. And there were so many, there's so much hypocrisy, and there's so much like, that's not right. Apologize to Jimothy right now for, and it's just like, no, because you're not going to. You're gonna make us feel bad that we are trying to include all learners, right? Even the whatever, right? And then it's fine for you to do that because this one parent said something mean, or like threatened to pull their kid. Good. Goodbye.
Yeah. Honestly.
Yeah. And you just reminded me of one more thing that is really like, oh my God, I think I literally just forgot it. Oh, all right.
Maybe it'll like boomerang back.
Maybe it will.
At
this point in the interview, you get to ask me a question.
I have a question.
And so that I'll have time for you to like percolate with that.
Ooh, oh yeah.
Okay, so we talked about how much we love graphic novels at the top of the episode. And I'm not sure if you like graphic novels or not, but I know that there's a number of graphic novels by like queer authors and illustrators. And so I wonder if you can share, like, who's your favorite queer author or illustrator, or what's your favorite queer graphic novel?
Okay. So I'm going to be a cliche, and say, because I don't read a lot of graphic novels. However, I've seen how impactful they are for my children. I am an auditory person, so I don't read a lot. I listen to audiobooks.
Love that. Yes.
And like,
I
read audiobooks. But and I can retain so much from that. But I if I sat down and read a chapter, I'm so lucky because I found, like, for grad school right now, I'm reading Bell Hooks, and all of her books are on audiobook, and they're actually read by a person, and I'm like, oh, thank you, because I can retain this. But I love the Heartstopper series, mainly because I got into it because of the show, and then I went back and started looking at all of the like chapters, and I love it was because of the show and the way that they used the graphic novel to influence the show. Like, they used animation in the show that really pulled me to wanting to see what it looked like on the page.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Also, I don't think that's a cliche because it's a really beautiful story.
It is.
It really is.
And it's
but
really impactful too.
Yeah. I agree. And I think it's so, I don't know, it's nice to see representation of a wider range of the collective that is the LGBTQ community, because you've got, you know, pansexuality, asexual, you've got transgender people, you have bisexuality, and like it's not just here's another cisgender gay male having a cisgender gay love story. So that is another big thing that I love about it, is that it truly is inclusive. And the more that I would pick up on things from the show and then like go back and read about them, I'm like, I was seeing these, you know, season 1, I'm seeing this, I bet that person is a part of the community and they're fit into this kind of, you know, realm. And so I really appreciate the inclusivity of it, because I know that DEI is such a bad word right now, but it's so necessary in all things, including, you know, entertainment representation. And so I loved seeing all of the inclusion in there. And then I'm also becoming a huge fan of Love on the Spectrum right now, TV show. And they have a lot of people who go on that show who are really into manga and graphic novels and stuff. And I just see how impactful that is. And it just makes me happy, because again, it's just coming from a representation standpoint. I love it.
Yeah, I haven't, that's like on my list of things to watch, but alas, I've been roped back into the Love is Blind franchise.
Haven't gotten down that road yet.
No, I heard that. Yeah. I honestly, I can't even remember what I was going to say. So yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, at this point, let's share with everybody how they can connect with you and Be More Transform.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Please connect with us.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Yeah.
You can find us on Instagram at Be More Transform.
Yes.
And then our website is bemoretransform.org.
Yes. Our email is bemoretransform@gmail.
So clear. I love it.
Yes.
Yeah. And we have a newsletter that we put a lot of love into. So if you go to our website, you can sign up for the newsletter.
Yeah.
And you'll hear about all the cool stuff we get up to every month. And it's like, we try and make the newsletter a little bit cheesy and joyful. And so hopefully you enjoy it. Well, maybe not cheesy, but.
Yeah. So I think other people might be like, it's cheesy, but I mean, the newsletter is basically just us in email format. So it's like,
so this is a teaser.
If you like what we say, if you want more of this. But honestly, I think that, and then also if you're in Maryland or DC, like any of the surrounding states, would love to hear from you. We work with schools. If you feel like, I could use some support, or want to come to one of our events, would love to meet you, would love to host you. It's there are thousands of us. And when I say that, I mean like teachers. There's so many of us, right? Queer people, like queer BIPOC people who are teachers. Like, we love our community, and what we love about working with queer students is being able to being a light in their world, to know that like being queer is joyful, is worth celebrating, and can mean a lot of different things, but ultimately like brings us a lot of happiness and connection. So would love to have more folks in our lives.
Perfect. I love that. So all of those links, folks, will be inside the show notes. I want to thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. I really enjoyed it. I mentioned to them at the start of this meeting that it's been a while since I've recorded. And so this was such a great, it just opened up my heart. I was just so happy because it's been a while since I've gotten to connect with people in this way. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your stories with everybody at home.
Yes.
Thank you, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you for having this podcast. I very much have loved listening to past past episodes and just like, again, feel like connected through my ears to the like past community or the past like speakers. And so love to have been here, and thank you for doing this. This is so needed.
Oh, it's honestly my pleasure. To everyone at home, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Teaching While Queer. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Leave a review, and that would help out tremendously. You can also support the podcast by going to www.teachingwhilequeer.com and hit support the show. Thanks so much, and have a great day.